Harbor Freight has some cheap stuff and some are bargains, but frequently the instructions are kind of laughable and leave you scratching your head. So I thought I'd make this humorous video about some of their lathe instructions, where I usually say, "Hi y'all, welcome to my shop. My name's Mike Peace and I'm here to share with you my passion for wood turning and share with you tips, tricks, and techniques to help you become a better wood turner." But because I'm doing this in my office on the computer from downloaded manuals, I thought this might be an appropriate place to do the videotape. And probably, nope, you're probably not going to learn anything about wood turning, but I hope you'll find something that'll make you smile in this lighthearted video. The Harbor Freight 1018 mini lathe is popular with a lot of beginners because Harbor Freight stores are everywhere. You don't have to pay shipping when you pick the thing up, and it's cheap because you get 20% off with a coupon. Okay, I've turned a lot on mini lathes, but I'll be real frank with you. I've never turned on a Harbor Freight mini lathe, and my goal is not here to knock Harbor Freight lathes, but just rather have kind of a humorous spin on some of their documentation. I actually, I think there's a lot of beginners that got started on inexpensive Chinese import lathes, and whatever gets you started is good. I actually started on a Jet 1014 mini lathe imported from Taiwan, so it's all good. Let's look at some of the Harbor Freight 1018 lathe manual advice from the manual I downloaded. The manual starts with, of course, typically with the general safety instructions we've gotten used to reading, and I'm convinced they were put there by lawyers every time they lost a lawsuit. Things like, don't use the rain, things like don't use the lathe in the rain, or don't use the lathe on drugs, or blah, 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 that chemicals known to the state of California to cause cancer, birth defects, and other reproductive harm. Let's start with page 5 of the manual. It provides some useful safety information, such as do not wear a necktie. Clearly this is a reflection of the changing dress code since it's 1919 wood turning instructional manual that I got from downloaded from the Gutenberg project, a course in wood turning by Archie S. Milton and Otto K. Wallers. I guess a tie is okay as long as you keep it tucked into your vest, as shown in this figure 3 of this 1919 manual picture. We go on to page go on for 9 pages before the Harbor Freight manual finally asks you to turn in your man card with this advice. Read the instructions. Come on, you want us to read the cotton picking manual? You must be from China. On page 5 of the manual, step 9, it says always position the tool rest above the center line of the lathe when shaping a piece of stock. Say what? Position the tool rest above the center line. Now let's look at their troubleshooting guidelines on page 19. More on page 5, step 14. The cutting tool must always be tight within the tool post or the chuck and adjusted to limit projection from the post. This will reduce the possibilities of the lathe of the tool breaking or bending. I wonder if this is what they had in mind. Okay, if I put the tool in the chuck, I guess I must hold the wood against the tool rest. Oh, but I don't have it above the center line. Wait a minute, I'm confused. Going further on to step 19, they've got instructions for mounting a face plate, also with a spur drive. If any of y'all ever use a spur drive mounted on the lathe at the same time as your face plate, I'd appreciate it if you leave in the comments below and explain why you do that, because I've never seen that done before. Now, on going on step 19, they say drill a 14-inch diameter hole through the center of the backing block. 14-inch hole on a 10-inch lathe. Good trick. Page 6 of the manual, they provide this helpful advice. Only feed the workpiece into a cutting tool against the direction of rotation. the workpiece must always be rotating toward you. That makes sense, but for those of you where this might be confusing, they provide a helpful picture. Is he standing on the other side of the lathe? I thought I understood. Now, some of y'all turn on the other side of the lathe for certain operations. I can kind of understand that. If you've got a specific reason for doing that, leave that in the comments below. On page 11, they also provide some useful definitions. Tool rest, a device mounted on the compound that holds the cutting tool. Whatever that means. Page 14, they provide some Goldilocks advice on how you determine whether the putting a piece of wood between centers is too tight or too loose. My advice is to hold a piece of wood with the right hand and turn the lathe the headstock spindle with the left hand and see if you can rotate the wood without it coming loose, and if so, that's probably tight enough. On page 11, they also provide some useful definitions. Tool rest, a device mounted on the compound that holds the cutting tool. Whatever that means. Page 14, item 3 says, note, if the lathe is used with a faceplate removed, a knockout tool, which is not, they say is not included, is required for removing the headstock spur center. But back to the knockout bar. You're a new turner. Do you know what a knockout tool is? Okay, let's look at the manual for a picture explanation of what's included. Nothing there. Maybe the parts list and the schematics at the end of the manual. No knockout bar there. Oh well, turns out they do actually include a knockout bar. Now in their troubleshooting advice, they offer this tip if the lathe won't turn on. Speed control lever is not in its lowest speed setting. I know their Harbor Freight 1236 lathe is a complete knockoff of the 1996 model of the Jet 1236, which uses what in the USA is called a Reeves drive. I don't know what you call it outside the US. You move a lever and the pulleys tighten or loosen to change the speed. You might call this a speed lever. So I'm wondering, whoever did the documentation, did he turn on a lathe one time? Maybe he worked on the Harbor Freight 1236 project and recognized it had a speed lever and decided he would throw that in to help us understand if the lathe doesn't start. But the Harbor Freight 1018 doesn't have a speed lever. I do give Harbor Freight credit for developing their own manual. I'm moving on to the Harbor Freight 1236, the one that is the knockoff of the Jet. I give them credit for developing their own manual. They copied everything else about the Jet 1236, but they didn't copy the manual. They did make their own photographs and use their own terminology. I do note that part 66 in the schematic on both manuals is called a speed label. Well, that's quite a coincidence. Part 66 of both manuals is called a speed table. Maybe that explains why they provided no speed advice in their manuals. The Harbor Freight 1236 lathe does not come with what is generally called an accessory, a knockout bar, either. Oh wait, it has a push rod instead. Push rod, also referred to in the manual as a push-out rod. Maybe this is some kind of common machinery term. All I know is wood turning. I don't know much about machinery, but I looked in the Jet 1236 manual thinking they copied the term from there, and guess what? To me it's even more confusing. They call the knockout bar a drift rod. Okay. I'm interested in what you folks outside the USA call a knockout bar. Leave your comments below. They also refer to the spur drive as a headstock spur. I guess that makes sense. I've never heard of a drive center called a headstock spur before. Their safety rule number 20 says complete hand sanding of all work pieces before you remove them from the lathe. I don't know why that's a safety advice. Hand sanding hand sanding with a bowl in your lap doesn't seem to be necessarily unsafe, but oh well. If you got this far in the video, you may want to watch this video I have on Harbor Freight stuff for wood turners. If you have examples of other funny or weird things you've seen in Harbor Freight manuals, please leave them share with us in the comments below. Y'all stay safe. Come on back here. Harbor Freight has some Chiefs